Um, so now, you know what, I'd like to introduce the audience to Christopher Peck. Captain Beck graduated from Northwestern University in 2013. He joined the Army and was commissioned through Officer Candidate School. He is a military officer serving at Joint Base Lewis McChord, Washington State. So Christopher, we'd love to hear any stories you have to share about your grandfather, please.
Thank you very much, Colonel Lee, General Brooks, and honored guests. Thank you for gathering today to honor the memory of my grandfather on his 100th birthday. My brother and I knew General Paik, not as General Paik, but as Grandpa Paik, Harabuji in Korean. As little kids, we were awed by, if anything, how old he was. Grandpa Paik loved nothing more than to sit next to us and quietly hold our hand. What conversation there was consisted mostly of "I love yous," loud and very thunderous "I love yous." As we grew older, though, Grandpa Peck would regale us with tales of his past. He awed us then with his memory. He'd recall all of his medals, including the 2 Taegu medals, the 4 Legions of Merit, and then the American Silver Star. He talked about his trip to Washington, D.C., where he met with President Eisenhower and negotiated the Mutual Defense Treaty. He'd recall the smallest details of the leaders he'd served with, where they'd commissioned, the units they'd commanded, the major campaigns they'd fought in. And then he'd grin slyly and, because he could, he'd say where they'd received graduate degrees. After I became an adult and joined the Army, I became awed by my grandpa's wisdom. Early in my career, I asked my grandfather what the key to successful leadership was. He turned and looked at me as if I had asked the most obvious question in the world and said, "Hard work. You must work hard." My grandfather lived that creed. After a long history of service as a military officer, ambassador, and government minister, my grandfather finally retired in 2015 at the age of 95. I asked him one time what he did during his retirement. What did he do to stay active and healthy? He answered, "Every morning, PT, physical training." But then he grinned almost guiltily and added, 8 o'clock, not early, 8 o'clock. Of course, like many retired soldiers, my grandfather quickly grew bored with his abundant free time, and so he went back to work. He would work right up until he passed away, insisting on his deathbed that there was so much left to do. This brings me finally to my grandfather's legacy. For me, remembering my grandfather boils down to understanding what he wanted to be remembered for. Of all the foreign awards and accolades my grandfather received, he treasured one above all others, the Silver Star he received from the United States Army. He treasured the Silver Star not as a symbol of his own importance or heroism. Rather, he treasured it as an affirmation of the close relationship between the armies of the Republic of Korea and the United States that he had worked so hard to foster. My grandfather understood that the survival of a free and prosperous Korean democracy relied upon the mutual assistance and shared sacrifice of allied nations, particularly the United States of America. For more than 70 years, my grandfather worked tirelessly to further that bond, to ensure the shared sacrifices of Koreans and Americans was remembered, and to ensure the lessons of the Korean War were not forgotten. Yet his work remains incomplete. To use his words, there is much left to do. Thank you again, General Brooks and Colonel Lee, for inviting me to speak, and thank you all for taking the time to honor my grandfather and his legacy.